You ever wonder why people get rules incorrect? Well, let's deal with some rules myths. Let's go. Hello, this is Jeffrey Rutledge, coming to you from Officiating to bring to you the very first iteration of our Rules Myths series. Okay, before we get started, I want to kind of talk about the different organizations that involve rules. The reason I want to discuss this is because oftentimes people will misunderstand rules from one level to the other. So I think it is important to discuss the rules differences between different levels and how those different organizations and what they represent. The first organization that I want to discuss is the National Federation of High Schools. The National Federation of High Schools is the organization that sets up rules for pretty much all 50 states in the United States, setting up rules that take place for the high school level primarily. Now, the National Federation does make rules, and those rules are often used at other levels like junior high, middle school, youth league, sometimes even travel ball. But the National Federation has their own committee, has their own organization, which is actually based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and those rules are configured primarily for high school level and youth sports. National Federation rules will be the primary rule source that I will be discussing when discussing all our rules myths. If there is another level that has some other kind of configuration, I might make that a point or make point of that as we go through the videos. The second organization that I want to talk about is the NCAA. That is the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Ironically, they are also based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and they have committees for both the men's side and the women's side. Their rules often do not mirror each other or often don't use the same terminology. Now, for the purposes of this video, most of the things I will be talking about when it comes to NCAA rules will involve the men's side, because that is the side that I actually work and am familiar with. And actually, it's the side that most of the public is aware of when they watch an NCAA game. There are more men's college basketball games on television, and also, so it is the side that I'm familiar with and also have worked for several years. So if I do not discuss an NCAA women's rule or maybe a little configuration of a women's rule, it is not intentional. It's just the level that I'm not familiar with. But so that you also know, NCAA rules also apply to all the other levels of college, like NAIA and junior college. They also use NCAA rules for the most part. And since we're talking about playing rules, these rules are not very different from one level to the other at all. Now, the other level that everybody will probably be paying attention to or watching and observing is the NBA, the National Basketball Association. The NBA has another set of rules and configurations for their levels. Keep in mind, the NBA is pro players that are adults ranging from anywhere probably from 18 to in their 50s that play this particular level. Their rules are specifically for their association or their grouping. Many of the NBA rules only apply to the NBA, the actual NBA league, or possibly the G League, but the NBA is a different system altogether, and they have different sets of rules and different configurations. Often people will confuse NBA rules with National Federation rules because they are unaware that there's a different rule set. For example, like traveling from the NBA level to the National Federation level. And finally, I want to discuss FIBA rules. FIBA is the Federation of International Basketball Association. FIBA's rules that are mostly international sports or the rest of the world might play outside of the United States. If you are watching, for example, the World Cup that is coming up here very soon, or the Olympics, FIBA rules apply to those levels. FIBA rules often do not reflect the United States rule sets like the NBA, the NCAA, and the National Federation. The main takeaway from this part of the video that all levels of basketball share a commonality in basic rules. There just might be a difference between one rule set or terminology from one level to the other. I do not want to get caught up in the weeds trying to express the differences between each and every level and each of their terminology. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or make a comment in the section so we can discuss those particular differences. Let's get into the very first rule that I want to discuss, and that rule is traveling. The myth about traveling is that traveling involves a certain amount of steps or allowance of steps in order to determine if a player has traveled. At the National Federation level and the NCAA level, the rule really only involves what we call the pivot foot. Once a pivot foot is established, a pivot foot for the most part cannot be picked up and put back down to the ground without passing or shooting. So basically, it must be noted that the only thing that really matters in traveling to an upright player is what they do with their pivot foot. Their non-pivot foot can take as many steps or as many times as being lifted and put back down as humanly possible. But the pivot foot requires that the foot be picked up and put back down in order to have traveling. If you pick up your pivot foot and pass and shoot, you have completed a legal move. I'm not going to get into every detail of the traveling rule, but that is one of the main parts of the traveling rule that we need to understand, and that's why it is a rules myth. So steps do not apply to the traveling rule. Also, another myth part of this rule is the momentum part when diving on the floor. If a player is diving on the floor for the ball and gains control of the ball, they can take as many distance from one area to the other as they can, as long as their momentum has not stopped. So it could be 10 feet, it could be 15 feet, it could be 25 feet, theoretically. Now, most players are not going to slide on the floor for a distance of 25 to 30 feet, but there is no distance requirement. So if I gain control of the ball while on the floor and I slide for 10 or 15 feet, theoretically, I have not committed a traveling violation, and there is no restriction for how many feet it is for a traveling violation. Once I've gained control of the ball on the floor as well, the other thing I can't do is try to get up. If I try to get up, about the only thing I can do is dribble to get up off the floor. Because dribbling is not, anytime I'm dribbling, it is never a traveling violation anytime I'm in an active dribble. So to be clear, if I'm on my back, the only other thing that I could probably do if I'm completely on my back, I could sit up, let's say off of my back, but I cannot turn to the side, or I cannot be on my knee and come up off my knee. If I'm on my stomach, there's not a whole lot of movements. I can't turn to the side, and I can't try to sit up onto my knees as well. Otherwise, I have not committed a traveling violation. Now, I will in a later video, sometime probably before the season or maybe even during the season, I will create some videos to break down certain rules, and traveling will be one of them. But just a general rule, understand that traveling does not involve how many steps you take. Traveling does not involve how much I slide on the floor. And traveling does not involve dribbling on any case whatsoever. It is impossible, it's actually rules fundamental in both the NCAA level and the National Federation level. Dribbling, it is impossible to travel during an active dribble. Another rule that often is misunderstood and you hear a lot from fans is the term reaching. Reaching in itself is never a foul and never can be considered a foul just because someone reaches for the ball. The only time reaching for the ball would be a foul is if you make illegal contact with some body part or the player in question in order to get to the basketball. Reaching and by itself can never be a foul. How would a player ever be able to steal the ball if they can't reach for the ball? Now, if there is contact that is with the arm or the body or some other body part, face, shoulder, in an effort to get to the ball, and that's where the contact took place first, you could have a foul. But the foul in those cases would either be a hold, a push, maybe an illegal use of hands of some kind. But simply reaching for the ball is not a foul. Also, it must be noted that contact with a hand that is connected to the basketball at the time is also not considered a foul. Contact with the wrist that is considered illegal, yes, could be considered a foul. But it is never a foul simply to reach for the basketball. Again, this is another terminology that oftentimes officials use incorrectly and confuses the participants and the fans and the coaches of what is going on or what we have called. Thank you very much for watching the very end of the video. This is the first of our myth series, so I want to make sure that you enjoy the content that is being said to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to make a comment or ask a question, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can with those comments. Also, don't forget to like the video. Do not forget to subscribe. And if you want notifications of upcoming videos and videos, especially in this series, hit the bell so you can get them immediately. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please come back, and I hope you enjoy the video. This is Officiating Born, getting better, one play at a time.